He built everything from the ground up, late nights, endless sacrifices, and a vision that turned into a company worth millions. But in one chilling moment, none of that mattered. To them, he wasn't the CEO. He wasn't the man who signed their paychecks. He was just black, and that was enough to throw him out of his own boardroom. What happened next would not only shock his employees, it would shake the very foundation of corporate power. How does a man reclaim what was stolen in plain sight? Marcus Hale wasn't just another executive in a suit. He was the face of resilience, a man who had clawed his way out of poverty, who believed in hard work more than luck. Every corner office, every late-night strategy session, every handshake deal was proof that his dream was real. His company had become more than just a business. It was his legacy, a place where hundreds of employees built their futures under his vision. But success has a way of drawing shadows. Behind the polished smiles of board members, whispers grew louder. Some questioned his decisions, others his authority. Yet the sharpest cut wasn't about his leadership at all, it was about who he was. Marcus had ignored those glances for years, brushing them off as corporate politics. Still, deep down, he sensed something darker brewing beneath the surface. And soon, that hidden current would rise, threatening everything he had built. The warning signs came quietly at first. Missed calls from board members. Sudden closed-door meetings Marcus wasn't invited to. Polite but icy smiles that seemed to stretch just a little too thin. He had seen enough corporate maneuvering in his career to know when something was off. But this felt different. This wasn't about numbers or strategy. It was personal. The moment of truth came during what should have been a routine quarterly meeting. Marcus walked into the boardroom, shoulders squared, documents in hand, ready to present the next phase of the company's growth. But instead of applause or questions, he was met with silence. Eyes darted across the table, avoiding his. Finally, one of the directors cleared his throat and said words that burned themselves into Marcus's memory. "You don't belong here." At first, he thought he'd misheard. This was his company, his vision. How could anyone question that? But the words that followed made their intent clear. They didn't care about his track record, his leadership, or his success. To them, Marcus was still just an outsider who had pushed too far into spaces they thought weren't meant for him. And in that moment, his title of CEO vanished like smoke in the air. Security was called. In front of people he had hired, trained, and trusted, Marcus was escorted out of his own boardroom. The humiliation was a weight that pressed down harder with every step he took toward the elevator. Employees stared, some in shock, others lowering their eyes, unsure if they should intervene or afraid they might be next. Outside the building, Marcus's mind raced. He had worked for years to earn respect, to prove that his skin color did not define his worth. But now, standing on the sidewalk, stripped of his position, he felt the crushing reality of what so many had faced before him. When power meets prejudice, merit often doesn't matter. Yet even in that moment of despair, a spark remained. Anger, determination. He refused to let them rewrite his story. They had thrown him out as if he didn't matter, but Marcus knew something they didn't. His fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning, because when a man is forced to watch everything he built get stolen in plain sight, he only has two choices: to walk away quietly or to rise louder than ever before. The next morning, Marcus returned, not with hesitation but with fire in his chest. Word of his humiliation had already spread, whispered through hallways and shared in hushed tones. Some employees had seen it firsthand, others had heard the rumors. But nobody expected what came next. Marcus walked straight past the guards who had escorted him out the day before. This time, he wasn't carrying presentation slides or quarterly reports. He carried proof, legal documents, contracts, and filings that no one in that room had expected him to have. While they had schemed in silence, Marcus had prepared for the day betrayal might come, and now he held every signature, every clause, every piece of leverage that tied the company to him, not them. The board sat frozen as he entered, the very room that had rejected him hours before. Their power was built on assumption, the belief that he would back down, that he would let humiliation break him. But Marcus didn't break. He stared into the faces that had dismissed him, voices trembling now where arrogance had once lived. "You told me I didn't belong," he said, not as a plea, but as a warning. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. Then came the shock. One by one, he read the names of those who had turned against him, each name tied to contracts that gave him authority to do what they thought impossible. Termination letters. In minutes, the balance of power flipped. The same board members who had thrown him out were now stripped of their positions, fired by the very man they had tried to erase. The humiliation they had hoped to bury him with now sat squarely on their shoulders. For Marcus, it wasn't just revenge. It was justice. But as he watched them leave in disbelief, he realized something even greater. This battle was bigger than him. It was about every time someone had been told they didn't belong, and that realization would change what he did next. When the dust settled, Marcus stood alone in the boardroom he had once built with nothing but grit and belief. The seats were empty now, stripped of the people who tried to erase him, yet the victory didn't feel like celebration. It felt heavier, because Marcus knew this fight wasn't just about a company. It was about the unspoken truth he had faced his entire life, that no matter how high you climb, some will still try to pull you down simply because of the color of your skin. But instead of burying him, the injustice lit a fire. Marcus became more than a CEO. He became a symbol. His story spread beyond the walls of his business, reaching those who had faced similar battles in classrooms, offices, and neighborhoods. People who had been silenced saw their reflection in his defiance. And suddenly, one man's struggle became part of a much larger movement. The scars of that day never left him. They weren't supposed to. They served as a reminder of what it takes to fight for dignity in a world that too often denies it. But those scars also carried power. The power to inspire change, to show that injustice exposed to the light can never truly win. And so, his story leaves us with a question we can't ignore. How many more Marcus Hales will it take before equality is not fought for, but lived? Because until that day comes, stories like his won't just be history. They will be warnings.